you so much for joining us. Welcome to this webinar called Global Perspectives, LGBTQ plus advocates' experiences in light of COVID-19, which is going to be 1 hour long from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is CV Viverito. I am the Associate Director at Out and Equal, Associate Director of Global Initiatives at Out and Equal. My pronouns are they, them. The purposes of today's call really is to explore in further detail and discuss how LGBTQ communities around the world have been affected by this pandemic, how it's affected the movement towards equality and inclusion, how that work is proceeding, and lastly, how the private sector can play an active role in these efforts. First of all, I want to say that I hope everyone on this call today is doing well and taking care. I know it's tough times for a lot of us right now, and we hope that you're all doing what you can to practice self-care, to care for your loved ones, and stay safe and healthy. I think before we get started, I would love to just pause for a minute and ask everybody to use the chat box and let us know where you're joining from today. What city, what country, whatever you feel like telling us. Seeing as this is a global conversation, it would be very cool to see where everyone's joining in from right now. So go ahead and let us know. Wow, okay. Trying to go through them all here. We got San Diego, Oregon, Jersey. I'm from Jersey. Let's see, I'm scrolling through. This is a lot, thank you. Toronto, the UK, Brazil. Nice. More Brazil, Seattle, London, New York, California. Okay. Very cool. Lots of folks from all over the US and folks from outside the US. This is great. Originally from Latvia. Looking forward to the conversation. Awesome. Cool. That's always really fun to know before we get started, right? So thank you. And as we all know too well, the purpose of this call is that this pandemic has a wide and continually growing impact on our world. We've seen that it affects marginalized communities even more, right? The pandemic has significantly greater impact on those without jobs or that don't work in the formal labor sector, those with jobs that require higher rates of exposure, those that work in sectors that have had to let employees go. It also affects those that are more at risk of domestic violence with underlying health concerns, those with little to no access to healthcare or health facilities. And of course, we also know that this overlaps greatly with race, class, gender, and LGBTQ folks. This being the case, maybe many of you have seen already, Action International has recently released this amazing report called Vulnerability Amplified, the Impact of COVID-19 Pandemic on LGBTIQ People. The report drew upon almost 60 rapid research interviews conducted with LGBTIQ folks around the world, and it highlights for us the overwhelming challenges faced by LGBTIQ people as a result of COVID, the surrounding containment measures, and these specific and amplified these impacts are specific and amplified when compared to the broader population. Of course, I'm going to let Maria from Outright, who is one of our amazing guests today, tell us more about the report in just a second. And we also have an old friend of mine, Jelena, today with us, who was interviewed for this report, and she's going to give us her perspectives from the Balkans. Also, if you haven't read it, and we can put the link to the chat or to these reports in the chat as we just did. But also if you haven't read it, Out and Equal has also released a report more specifically around what employers can do to protect their LGBTQ employees during this pandemic. And we worked with Matos Filho, who's a Brazilian law firm, to translate this resource into the Brazilian context. So we translated it to Portuguese, but we also updated the content to make it relevant to the Brazilian reality and Brazilian legislation. And so our other guest today, also a good friend of mine, is Frederico, was a big part in creating this resource. And his firm has also put out a lot of their own information and briefs and resources on addressing the COVID pandemic in Brazil as well. So clearly we have a very interesting panel of experts today. I think it's going to make for a really enriching and informative discussion. And it's really a privilege to be a part of the conversation today and talk with all of these amazing folks. So with that, I think I'll let them introduce themselves and then we can go ahead and get started. Maria, if you want to start us off, then we can just go around.
Yeah, sure. My name is Maria Sjöden. I use they or she as my pronouns. I'm a non-binary lesbian, originally from Sweden, but based in the US, where I'm the Deputy Director of Outright Action International. Thank you so much for organizing this. It's really exciting. Thank you.
Hi all, I'm Jelena. I'm coming from the Balkan region. I work currently in Equal Rights Association for the Western Balkan and Turkey. My pronoun is she, her, and I'm working as a capacity development manager. Thank you for inviting me to participate on this panel.
Hey there, I'm Frederico, as Sylvie said, but you can call me Fred. I'm a lawyer at Matos Filho, which is a Brazilian law firm. I've been working with them for almost 4.5 years now. And ever since I joined, we created an ERG group, which was the first one in Brazil. I'm a cis, gay, and proud man, and my pronouns are he and his.
Great, thanks so much, everyone. Without further ado, I'm actually going to turn it over to Maria right now to walk us through the research, show us a little bit about what it's about, and also what some of the findings were.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna share my screen to talk about this. So when COVID hit, as a global organization, I'm sure many of you listening in saw this as well in your organizations. When you're in a global organization, something like what became later a pandemic became known to us earlier because we have staff and colleagues in different parts of the world. And so we immediately realized what this could potentially mean, and that is that there would be a disproportionate impact on LGBTIQ communities, because that is similar to what we have seen in other crisis situations, like natural disasters, for example, like the earthquakes in Haiti, Nepal. We've seen it in different disaster situations. So we wanted immediately to launch this research project, which I will talk more about. And we wanted to use that research as a basis for a lot of advocacy. I'll talk a little bit about that. And we also realized the disproportionate impact it would have on our communities and organizations. So we also launched a fund. And these three components correspond directly to the work that Outright Action International does on a normal basis. Like, we've been around for 30 years, promoting human rights for LGBTIQ people everywhere. And we do it on a regular basis through data collection, through resourcing the movement, and through advocacy. So it corresponds to all of those things. And we do advocacy on the national, regional, and the international levels, including at the United Nations, where we hold what is called special consultative status. It just gives us access to a lot of those spaces. And we wanted to use that and be able to bring the knowledge that we gathered. So that's sort of the, we wanted to know what was the impact of the pandemic, and even more so, the measures taken to curb transmission. So one of the things that we found was that there are ways that LGBTIQ people are specifically impacted by the pandemic, but the even greater impact in many cases comes from the lockdowns, quarantines, whatever the word the local governments are using, that has had an even bigger impact. And we interviewed almost 60 people from all regions of the world, almost 40 countries, to gather this data. And we also did a literary review. And that, the purpose of that was to situate this research within the context of other disasters and crisis situations. Because we wanted to add this to, we think that this research is relevant for the crisis that the world is in right now, but we really long-term also want to change the ways that governments and humanitarian agencies respond in crisis situations. We organized our findings according to 7 themes. And the number one thing that we heard from people was around devastation of livelihoods and corresponding rising food insecurity. And we heard a little bit in the introduction, of course, I think we have all heard about this from our local context, like people losing their jobs or being furloughed or not getting, not being able to get paid. And in a lot of parts of the world, this led immediately to food insecurity. And sometimes the measures that have been taken to address it does not help our communities. So one of the examples is in our report is from a lesbian couple in the Philippines, where their local government is distributing food support to families. But when they went there to get it, they were told that they couldn't get it because they didn't correspond to what they assumed, a family would look like. Disruptions in healthcare and access to medication. We heard this a lot from different groups of people, including trans people, who are told that hormone therapy is non-essential. So, you can't get it right now. You have to wait until after the pandemic. And I think all of us who are familiar with LGBTIQ issues realize that it's actually not something that you can just delay. It's not non-essential. It's very, very essential. And also, of course, when it comes to healthcare, people are very aware that they might easily become discriminated. So we interviewed a trans woman in Moscow who basically said only if she is dying would she go to the hospital, because she knows she's going to be discriminated. She doesn't want to go unless her life is threatened, but otherwise she won't go. Elevated risk of family and domestic violence. We've heard about this a little bit in the news, but I think most people think of it as it is a heterosexual problem. And what we find in our study is, of course, that if you lose your job or you're on lockdown, many people have to go back to live with their original biological families who are not necessarily accepting. And so there's one heartbreaking example from one of the people that we interviewed in St. Lucia in the Caribbean, who says that they have organized online support system. And one of the young people calling in literally has to go into the closet, hoping that his family is not going to hear him when he reaches out for help. This, of course, links to the increased isolation and anxiety that we also see. Scapegoating, we've heard about it. We heard about it in the US, but we've heard even more about it from Ghana, Liberia, many countries where religious leaders or other people with influence blame the pandemic on LGBTIQ people. Instances of abuse of state power coming from the lockdowns. And because we interviewed a lot of people who are active in organizations, we heard about their anxiety about organizational survival. What's going to happen to their organizations, which of course, as we know, are a big part of what's driving change in society. I think I'll stop there now. This is the quick overview of our findings, and I'll come back to it. Let's see. I'll come back to it as we move into the discussion.
Nice. Thank you. That, as you all can see, this research is vastly important, and I love what you said about it hopefully just being a way that we change response. I also hope that it's a catalyst to that. That's very, very important. And I'm going to actually go straight over to Jelena. I know that in the Outright report, since you were also interviewed for this, you had mentioned, as Maria was saying, some of the impacts of COVID-19 on the work that you do included the delaying of hearings for LGBTQ related policies, border closings, delayed funding. And now, three to 4 months later, I'm wondering, have these issues continued? And if they have or if they haven't, how have you continued to try to be getting this work done despite the growing challenges?
So everything that I said in the interview is pretty much still ongoing, because we still have, at least in Serbia, we have the elections. So we know that for Serbia concretely, we will have the lockdown of the government for at least 3 months more. And that implies automatically that we will have all the LGBT related policies will be on hold for at least like 6 months, basically. But in relation to the COVID, we did have some changes in terms of some advocacy meetings have been held, something is moving, progressing. But the thing is that we are now focusing more in Balkan region on the community. And what we are hearing back from the community is not so great in terms of their employment, their poverty status, and everything else that is related to their personal lives and identities. So I know for sure that majority of organizations are more turned to helping community and directly working with community, which leads us to other challenges that the organizations are facing, which is lack of the funds for the direct work with the LGBTI community. And in general, lack of the funding for the LGBTI organizations in the Balkan region is still because of the accession, because of some of the countries are already having EU status, and it's quite challenging for every single one of us, activists and organizations, to deal with the current situation. So we're asking for the best practices all around the globe to see what will work in these situations concretely.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually, I wonder now if we turn it to Freddie and kind of get the Brazilian take on it. Can you tell us a little bit about how things are going in Brazil and what the response has been there? And I'll add, as someone who is a leader in LGBTQ workplace inclusion, an ERG leader, are there ways that the private sector can have that external reach towards the community and play a leading role there?
Yeah, sure. I hate to say it, but things with COVID here in Brazil, they're not good. It's not under control. If we're not yet, we're soon to be the new epicenter of the pandemic. We're breaking records by the day, and we have a hiatus in the government. We have a president that first said that this was just a mild flu, and maybe it's a coup from the left wing. And things go on that he's always downsizing the effects of the pandemic, and we can get it under control. So I think that yes, the private sector can and should play a leading role, because once you have this hiatus in the public administration, it's up to us to lead. So and I've been seeing lots and lots of good initiatives from the private sector. I think there's a lot of solidarity right now. That's this overall sense that we should help each other. And as far as LGBT people go, I think that more can be done. I can name 2 initiatives that we at Matos Filho did. So I think it was late May, I think, we put out a resource with our pro bono team on the impacts on LGBT rights. So it's basically a guide saying that where people can seek guidance or shelter, how can they report abuse or renegotiate a contract, or even seek financial or food aid, because of course there's an economic crisis going on. Other than that, because the government's putting out an emergency aid, but there are lots of people, they don't even have social security numbers. So we also put that on the guide. So that's a lot of help. And another initiative that we've been doing, it's called, I'm going to quickly translate it, but Together for a Cause. It's along with people from Sexbox. So we're helping them put together NGOs so they can better access funds and donations, so they can get that aid to the people that need. Because, for instance, we have trans people living on the streets that were depending on like prostitution, and they don't have any source of income, and they're not finding any aid. So we're also doing that. And on this same project, we're putting competitors to talk, and it's like a think tank, so they can come up with solutions for the present crisis that we have going on right now. So yeah, I think we can play a leading role, and we should, because, and I think the American friends that are logged on know about that, we are not finding any solace in the voice of our president.
Yes, the news would agree with that statement. Actually, speaking of private sector solutions and how, I mean, I like what you said, the fact, I think something that this pandemic has done is forced us to try, well, not all of us, but a lot of us try even harder to find community, because maybe we can't go walk to a friend's house, maybe we can't have a safe space that we had before. So yes, now more than ever, we absolutely need to be the ones to step up. And Maria, I know that you're someone who's obviously super close to this research. I imagine you have a really interesting bird's eye view of how the pandemic is affecting these different communities around the world. And do you have recommendations for global organizations or maybe multinational companies, but these sort of overarching systems that can be helping to implement support mechanisms?
Yeah, I'm thinking of a few examples immediately. Like, first of all, I think it's really important for companies and other organizations overall to be aware of how communities might be affected in different ways. Because I think there is like, oh, this pandemic, we're all in it together, which of course is true, but not everyone is affected in the same way. And so I think that when there is something like large scale like this, some of the nuance that might otherwise be present disappears, because it's like, oh, now it's everyone. We have to do something for everyone. And that is true. But if you use one mechanism for everyone, you're not going to reach everyone. I mean, I love the examples that you brought up, Federico, about, trans people living in the streets. They are affected in a very different way. You need special mechanisms in order to be able to reach them. And so I know, for example, like many companies are now donating to COVID relief funds, which is great. But I think that they should use their voice. If they're donating to mainstream, large humanitarian organizations that supposedly reach everyone, they should at least ask the question. Ask about how are you specifically going to reach LGBTIQ people? And I think some of them, I mean, we have seen with the donations to our emergency fund, we have had many companies come on board, and actually in total, we've almost reached $1 million at this point, giving out grants. So far, we've given out almost 60 grants, and we have an additional round or two coming. But we did receive 1,500 applications, I must say. So it's like there's a lot of need there. But I think that some companies, I think, have complemented their donations to other organizations by specifically donating to our LGBTIQ COVID relief fund. And I think that's one way of doing it. And I think that companies should also use their voice and amplify their values around inclusion. Because I think we saw this, like my example about the scapegoating. It's like pointing to LGBTIQ communities as like, oh, it's their fault, they're causing it. Or just sort of doubling down on the hyper local. And it's like we still need to think about what's happening around the world. We have to be globally minded, even if our efforts are made on the local basis. And we have to communicate inclusion. It's more important now. It's like we see a lot of the response. It's like, okay, let's close the borders. Let's, call this virus by various names, making sure people understand it's something from the outside, but it's not. It's like, this is a virus. It doesn't have any nationality. And communicating inclusion, I think that is also something that is incredibly important. Those are some of the things that I'm seeing and thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I could not agree with you more. The whole idea of, think global, but act local. I wish there was a template, but there's not. That's not the world we live in. And to that point, Yelena, I wonder, working with ERA, which covers Western Balkans and Turkey, have you seen any variation across those countries, or at least maybe within the broader region as well, but in terms of impact and then the solutions being implemented? So are there any lessons learned that other countries might be able to take off of that or implement or innovate from?
So the thing that I would maybe emphasize is the work of LGBTI organizations in terms of connecting with small local businesses, working, because we already have some of our companies implementing the UN standards for businesses. So they are trying to approach the big businesses, local businesses, trying to collect the funds to reroute them in form of food and other means for the community. So I think that's one of the things that maybe we as the leaders of the community can try to do in terms, I mean, not all LGBT people are gonna approach their employees, employers and try to ask for the funds. So maybe we are the ones who can also do that job for them in terms of trying to organize some funds for the companies, trying to organize some online galas, trying to organize some campaigns for crowdfunding campaigns and etc. So we can also try to fundraise more for the ones that are in need, basically, and that's it. So far, we are seeing just like LGBT organizations applying for the grants like outright maybe, and some other global funds that are opening for calls for the support of for the community. And the only thing that we are seeing now from other businesses is like for IKEA, we know that they're having some specific funds for the LGBTI community, and the organizations are approaching those kind of companies, basically, which are selling. Converse is selling for the Pride Month, the Pride collection. Adidas is selling the Pride collection. So we are approaching the dealers local dealers in Serbia, in Croatia, and Slovenia, Macedonia, whatever, trying to see what additional funds we can fundraise to distribute to smaller and grassroots organizations and initiatives. And that's it, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fundraising has been a huge focus, obviously, across the world. And during this time, obviously, it's difficult. That's why the emergency fund that Outright has is so important. Crowdsourcing, things like that, key right now. So yes, thank you for sharing that. I think, Freddie, let's go back to you. I think I know, as I mentioned earlier, Matos Filho, we recently partnered together actually to produce this resource that was more specific to the pandemic's impact on LGBTQ workplace inclusion and what companies can be doing. I know before I asked you, well, what can the private sector be doing externally? How can they face the community and help the community? But also, what can they be doing internally? How can they be supporting their LGBTQ employees right now?
Well, first of all, I think this point that Maria raised, which is very much important, is that even though we have a crisis that affects everyone, we have to keep in mind that people that are vulnerable, were already in a vulnerable state, they will be more prone to the crisis itself. So more than ever, the work with diversity and inclusion is important because we have to take care of our people. So internally, I think that, first of all, we shouldn't stop whatever it is that we're doing. Of course, there are maybe financial constraints that due to the crisis you have. So I think that I always say that you have to be creative and maybe just get back to basics. For example, we're doing like lots of this kind of virtual events. We just did one this morning talking about the importance of the allies and how they can engage more people. And also keep in mind that some people maybe they live alone or they live with their families and they're not completely out. So it's nice also to be present, call, or maybe FaceTime a little bit. So you address things like anxiety and bring that culture of belonging. Other than that, just keep the hard work, think of creative ways of talking about diversity and making people feel more included. That's the touching point.
Nice. And are there any like specific roles that ERGs can be taking? I know we've gotten that question a lot lately from ERG leaders saying, is there something more that we can be doing? I don't know if you have any insight around that.
I think well, right now, I think that we can, and I hate to say it again, but also think about ways we can give back to the community and bring more people to talk about these issues. I'm saying that because I'm talking from a place of privilege. I work at a law firm. People make good money, so it's not like that vulnerable. But I can't be just like checking on my privileges and turn the blind eye for everything that's going on out there. Even though I can't go out on the streets as I used to, I know there are people that are starving, people that are facing violence, either psychological or physical. Also, I think it's a very good moment to talk more about mental health and how we can support each other as a community. So the ERGs play a good role in that because we have been doing work towards that end. So it's a kind of catalyst that we can use in our companies.
Yep, exactly. I agree. And glad you bring up mental health. It's a whole other theme that we've been hearing out of this is not only how to support in the ways that we've already mentioned, but specifically checking in, making sure folks are okay, supporting them in that way. And we've actually just recently put out a resource specifically around mental health because we have been hearing that so much. So actually along that theme, maybe what we can do is we can kind of go around and kind of close out this conversation, but then go to the Q&A. So folks on the call, feel free to be sending in your questions as you're thinking of them, because we'll get to them in just a second. But first, to sort of end on a hopeful note, if you will, perhaps we can all go around and share a little bit how both you and your communities are working on staying connected, practicing self-care when you have the time to, when you have the energy to, whether it's staying organized, whether it's staying motivated, whether it's staying hopeful, whatever it is that you are trying to do at this time, you just want to share. And then also people on the call as well, please feel free to jump in the chat and share what you've been doing. This can be a brainstorming session on how we can all kind of be taking care of each other during this time. So I'm not sure who wants to start us off, anyone really.
I'm happy to start. I mean, I think I've been an activist of sorts in the LGBTIQ space for over 20 years. And I think that for me is related to this. And that is what gives me hope, because that's how we change the world. And that doesn't change during a pandemic. In fact, I've been so inspired by seeing how our own communities and our allies step up to take care of ourselves. Like when we can't necessarily count on the governments or other institutions to help our communities, we step up ourselves. And maybe in some cases we shouldn't have to be doing that, but we still do it. And that for me is hope. Like, I mean, I believe in like watching Netflix and everything else as much as everyone, but it's like being able to just do what you can. And that to me inspires hope. That's how we're going to make a real lasting change in the world. That's what I look to.
I'm going to continue with what Maria said. So basically, I've been in activism for at least 15 years now. And in these 15 years, I've seen progress. I've seen things happening. I've seen movement changing. I've seen community getting better. I've seen lots of things that we are now communicating about, the topics that we are opening within the community and outside of the community. So that brings me hope that at least in forthcoming years, we will have more conversations, we'll progress more, we'll be mainstreamed more, even on the Netflix and etc. So I think things are getting better. And I'm hoping that the progress will be much faster now, considering the online movement that is now connecting us globally.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I'm saying this a lot lately because one of the good outcomes of this crisis is that we're actually waking up to see people that were otherwise invisible if it were not for the pandemic. It brings me hope to think that maybe we will work towards a better world because of that, because we're now seeing the effect that social inequality and exclusion has on the society as a whole once we have a crisis going on. So that's at least it brings me hope to think that way, even though I don't have any perspective whatsoever about when this is gonna end. But yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for sharing. I just real quick, I'll echo all of everything you just said. I can relate to so much. I appreciate your perspectives. For me, I think, like all of you, I've considered myself an activist for a long time, particularly on a more global scale. And this has almost made me, in a way, more conscious in a way of like, oh gosh, like, let's go, let's do this, right? Like, and when you're an activist for so long, you're always doing it. I'm not saying that you're pausing or anything, because there's really no time to pause sometimes, but this is almost an extra call to be like, okay, let's take a look at our community. What parts of our community are suffering the most? In which ways are they the same? In which ways are they different? Where in the world are they different and perhaps in need of a different solution, as Maria was saying? And so that in and of itself is both distracting and in that way healing. Even though it's a bit more stressful to be thinking about all of these things, to be feeling like you're doing something to try to make a difference is in and of itself healing, but also maybe stressful, but still. So I'm just gonna go to the chat and read some things that other folks are saying. Let's see. Start at home with extended family and friends. Yep. That's definitely a good one. Especially like what I've heard lately is folks having maybe more, you find that you're having more conversations. Sometimes they're difficult and sometimes they're not. But the fact that we're having more of those difficult conversations is a good thing. I don't know if any of y'all want to add to that. If not, I can keep reading. Okay. We also have lots of deep breaths, sometimes a good cry, then listening to some great music, getting rest, taking a break from technology, turning off the news, reading some of the amazing books that are available. Awesome.
I've been using that Headspace app in the mornings. It helps with anxiety, just to try and learn to meditate. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I'm scrolling around, so sorry if I'm going a bit out of order here, but someone says, it's been inspiring to me to see the intersectionality in the BLM movement for Black trans lives and the number of people who have stepped up to fight for people's lives. Absolutely, absolutely. That has been, and even amidst a pandemic as well, right? That really says something to the strength of the movement, I think. And as you said, seeing the intersectionality in the movement as well has been inspiring. I'll give you all a chance to chime in there if you would like to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is, and I think we need to hold this intersectionality all the time. And I think when you do global work, it's like I've been so inspired by seeing the BLM protests globally, not just in the US, but like people contextualizing it, because racism is a global pandemic. It exists everywhere. And some of the roots when it comes to homophobia and transphobia are similar, like colonialism spread a lot of these things across the world. So it's like, we have to be able to hold those. We have to be able to fight intersectionally all the time. It is our duty.
Absolutely.
What I like about the recent BLM movement is that I've been hearing from people that I wasn't hearing before, that they're saying, yeah, it's important that we should talk. We shouldn't just stay silent. We have to talk to change society. And to see people waking up to that is really inspiring, really inspiring. So I like it. I like it that it touches other marginalized groups. So it's important. intersectionality hasn't been even more on the spotlight as it has been right now. So it's another good thing to follow.
Yep, absolutely. So I think I'll just start blending these like tips that people are saying with some questions, and we'll just go through the chat in a kind of more organic way, if that's cool with everyone. Because related to this, there was a question that came in that says, do you have any advice on balancing activism with other aspects of your life, especially when your reality needs that activism to improve it? How do you sort of take an emotional break from the burden of activism, even when you think you can't afford it? I couldn't relate more to that question, but I'll let one of our panelists take it first. That's a great question.
I haven't figured that out still, so maybe someone else.
I've never thought myself as an activist until I started working at the ERG. I even got an award for being a future LGBT leader, and it just hit me, well, maybe I am. And I don't think there's a switch off button. I think that the work that I've been doing, it was just being real and true to myself. And once I started doing that, I came across as an activist. So I don't think that you have to find a balance, because most of the times it's just about you projecting your true self out, and you're either doing this in your personal life or a professional life. It doesn't matter.
I think it's also, for me, I think it's about allowing myself to switch off. Like, I don't have to watch the news all the time. It's like I need to disconnect a little bit, and it's like allowing myself to do it, and making sure that I can also, even though it's hard, like I want to find joy in my activism, and that's what I do when I connect with others. So for me, it's actually, a lot of it is actually joyful, like doing it and knowing I'm part of trying to create a change. But then, you know, don't read everything, or don't watch everything.
Yes, I also take healthy breaks from the news. And I'll just add to that. Something I learned a while ago was I would feel a sense of guilt for wanting to take a break. But I realized that if I don't take a break, how am I doing my best work? I'm not. I'm tired. I'm feeling maybe more pessimistic than usual. So for me, taking a break is part of doing good work. Self-care is also self-preservation, and it's important. Great. So we're getting a lot of comments in that. So thank you. Let's keep it coming. This conversation is great. Someone said Headspace is great. They have calming sleep music. So shout out to Freddie's app, Headspace. I'm going to try it now. What else do we have? So I'm just going to read 2 comments here. So someone says, I think intersectionality is one of our most powerful tools to connect as humans and understand that whatever our reality is, we've all felt vulnerable at some time. Yeah, absolutely. And then Dan Gaylord says, like many of us, I live alone, I meditate, and I get a lot of time now to be my own best friend. Nice. I take walks in the evening, even though it's getting quite hot, from a distance to get to wave or visit with neighbors. I work hard to keep my spirit centered with breath work and meditation, talk to my spirit. And above all, even though this time is scary, I work hard not to give more fear back into the world, but to give to the global consciousness energy of hope and love. That's awesome. I will try to do that as well. Nice. So keep them coming. I hope I didn't miss anything here.
I saw one on the chat box.
I did.
About
Up at the top, right?
How allies can be more helpful right now.
Thank you.
So we were talking about this morning, and one thing that allies usually don't know is how their voice echoes maybe even more than ours, because they have a overreach that sometimes when we're speaking, we're not talking to that audience. So instead of just thinking like, oh, you should do this and this because you're not doing that, just talk openly about these subjects, because you will probably be talking to someone that I haven't been talking to, and will bring their conscience over these matters. So that's a really nice way of doing it. One suggestion that I did to our allies, and of course, again, guys, this is Brazil, so it's we're very soccer oriented. So I suggested that we should have like a match with the company's team and a gay team, so you can see that everyone can play ball, and you can still think alike and talk about these subjects outside the office environment. That was just an idea. I'm very eager to make that happen, and it also brings me hope that sometimes in the future this pandemic will end and we'll be able to do that.
I mean, I think on allyship that, I mean, honestly, we should all be allies, because we're not, we have to, like, we talked a lot about intersectionality already. So it's like, I think we all have to realize that in some situations we're part of a community, sometimes we're an ally, and we can be all of those things. But I think that one of the things that we can do is like visibly show up, whatever that means. Like, but it's, we have to make our allyship visible, because otherwise people don't know about it. So whatever that means for you in your situation, be as visible as you can as an ally. I think that goes a long way. And speak up. Like those are the things I think we need that.
Speak up. Like, take advantage that it's June, it's Pride Month. Go on your social media, talk about it, approach the subject in every way you can. That's a huge help. Huge.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And someone just said in the comments, with their DEI leader at their company, and they're saying, you know, they realize even just a few minutes of time that they can find in the day to talk with staff that had requested time to talk matters. So that's great. And that right there is the example of being an ally, even when you feel like you don't have that much time in the day. Actually, speaking of that, I know because of the research had highlighted those very specific amplified impacts. And I'll pose this to Jelena and Maria. Did you all see any good examples of perhaps the LGBTQI community coming together as even as allies for one another, as allies for our most vulnerable, in ways to help folks who are maybe less food secure, or more at risk of domestic violence, something like that? Are there good examples that we can learn from?
So as I previously mentioned, there are lots of LGBT organizations whom are organizing to help the community, which is in need. But the thing is that what we've seen is that the businesses led by LGBTI people are making the donations and trying to connect even more than in previous years, I would say, which makes us even wondering what will be the next step in terms of how to engage, because not all the businesses are publicly open about being led by LGBTI persons. So we are trying to see what when we do, how to connect all the dots basically. And the thing is that those kind of businesses have made much more impact on the community in terms of giving it back basically and paying it forward, whatever you want to call it. But that meant a lot for the organizations to have at least lower the pressure on them from the community and seeing the whole other aspect of possible solutions for the current situation. Yeah.
I think we saw a lot of those examples, and we saw it in the research, and we've seen it even more through the fund applications. Where actually, because the fund was only open to organizations, obviously it's like we couldn't handle, I don't know how many individuals would have applied. That would have been impossible. But I mean, many organizations described to us the outreach that they are doing. So it's like, for example, this one organization in the Philippines whose acronym is LOVE. They literally went shopping after they received the grant, and then they, for a couple of days, like sent us WhatsApp messages of how they were distributing food and like like the cleaning products that everyone needs now to make sure that no one gets sick who doesn't have to. So it's like I think people have really stepped and looking to like older people in their communities, reaching out to trans people, reaching out to people who are living alone, like all of those things. I really think that our communities have stepped up a lot. And we see it also as outright how our supporters and people close to us are joining. We have a Pride with a Purpose campaign that we're running this year, and like how people are really stepping up. And so I think that is, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And it's even reading through the research, like seeing some of the things that people are doing is just, it's incredible. And it makes me, I mean, it's Pride Month. It makes me really proud to be a part of our community and see the way that we're supporting each other. And with just like about 8 or so minutes left, I wonder if on that note, we might close out and you can all share maybe how you hope to see our community coming out of this situation. I realize we don't have a timeline for that, but whenever that may be, you know, maybe there's ways in which there's lessons that we've learned that will carry throughout our work as we move forward. Maybe it's the ways in which we respond to a crisis or a pandemic, but I'd love to hear your thoughts just about, you know, what things you're seeing now and then what you hope that means for how we kind of come out of this. You can take a second to think about that, but it's a big question.
I can jump in first then. I think that for me, a lot about that the future is around the response from governments and institutions and companies and humanitarian organizations. I hope that what we are learning through this pandemic will translate into lessons so that they can be more inclusive in their responses going forward. Because I think that is part of what we need. We can't always be our own solutions. Like, we need others to step up, and I hope that we can help teach them some of those lessons.
Well, I'm hopeful that all the solidarity that I've been seeing right now, we will keep on doing that. But more importantly, I hope people and institutions are waking up to the fact that it is not right that 90% of the trans population works informally or has to resort to prostitution to have an income. So once the pandemic is over and the economy is picking up, we have to think of policies how to really include people and not just support them on the time of need. And I think that the society is waking up to that. And I'm hopeful that we'll see a better world on the days to come.
So what I'm seeing now is that the LGBTI community is now more connected than ever. Local movements, the regional movements have become global movements. And I'm hopeful that it's going to remain the same, because we need to share whatever we have as a good practice, whatever we have as any kind of solution for the future work that we are doing, for future stepping up, for mainstreaming the issues that we are having, for challenging jointly governments, for challenging jointly inclusion in the economics and everything else. So I think that the globalization is now the next step for the LGBTIQ plus community. And we should remain at this point, because we are now connected globally and we are changing the movements rapidly by being online and connected. So I think that we need to stay, and we need to use this online resource that we now have created for the future work.
Yeah, I love that. That's so true. This has kind of forced us even deeper into this digital world, those of us that have access. And it's a really great way to feel connected to folks that maybe you didn't feel connected to before. And now you do, and you're going, well, why wasn't I here? Why wasn't I in this space before? So I agree. I encourage us all to stay in this space and to explore it further. And as Maria said as well, it's amazing that and Freddie said as well, that we're looking out for each other, but hopefully this also encourages the larger systems in our society to do the same. So that's pretty much it for today. I just want to thank everyone so much, all of you and this was such an active chat box today, which is so cool. I love that it feels like more of just a conversation. That's really what this is about, right? Staying connected, having these conversations. So thank you to everyone who sent in the chats. And there was links going around. So hopefully you got all the links to the research, to Outright's research, as well as some of the Out and Equal resources. But if not, you can check out the websites and see them there. And I hope you're all staying healthy and doing all these things that we're practicing. That's it. If you all have a quick kind of final closing words to say, whether it's just stay healthy or anything else, let us know.
I just wanted to thank for the opportunity. It was an amazing 1 hour chat with all of you guys. And people, if you're in Brazil, please stay at home.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I find this actually to be very inspiring. This is my self-care for today, I think. I feel very inspired by this. Thank you.
Yeah, also, thank you for joining in. And I love being connected with all of you guys. Take care also. Be good.
Yep, I'll echo that. Thanks so much, everyone. This session will be recorded. We'll hope to have it up on our website soon, within the next day or so. I know it's Thursday, so if it's Monday. But either way, you will get an email letting you know, and you'll get the link to the video. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us at hello@outandequal.org. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll talk soon. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye.